welcome everybody. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
This will be our January Apex Transit Advisory Committee meeting. I think I'm supposed to do that to get us going. So there we go. Let's start with just a quick introduction for the purposes of video. Shannon, we'll start with you.
Sure. Shannon Cox, Long Range Planning Manager.
Brett Gant, Town Council.
Gay Williams, TAC Committee Member.
Wendy Perry.
Andy Working.
Linda Barrett.
Patrick Curley.
Lauren Stoudemire, Planner 2.
Alicia Harris, Planner 2, Planning Department.
Happy New Year, Alan Coleman, Town Clerk.
Katie Schwing, Transit Planner.
Ashley Gentry, Deputy Town Clerk.
All right. So first order of business is to approve the minutes from our October committee meeting. Has everyone had a chance to review? Does anyone have any questions, comments, concerns, requests for changes? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. I'll make a motion.
All right, and a second? All right. All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right. Minutes are approved.
And may I just, for the recording, say it was Linda who put the motion forward and Gay who seconded.
Got it. All right, so that takes us to our council work session update on boards and committees. So Alan?
Alrighty, Happy New Year to everyone. An email went out right after that work session that I believe each of you should have received. So this is just a high-level overview of what that work session entailed and the topics that were covered, and then what you can expect to see coming forward. So most of the work session was recommendations. So all of this will be coming back through a more formalized process. You'll receive kind of a survey asking, okay, what do you think from the Multimodal Transportation Advisory Board are topics that should be covered, things that should not be covered. Staff will also receive that, and then that will come before the Town Council for final adoption March, April-ish. So this is just to make sure that everybody's on the same page with those recommendations. Again, next steps, and then allow you an opportunity to ask any questions. Okay. Alrighty. So again, just to recap, you all kind of know what your role is on an advisory board, and that's to provide guidance and expertise in your specific fields to help staff develop policy, inform planning decisions, etc., and then provide recommendations to the Town Council. Currently, or at the time of this presentation, we had 9 advisory boards at that December work session. 3 were dissolved. 2, B-City and TreeCap were consolidated under the Environmental Advisory Board, and then the Housing Advisory Board was dissolved. The School of Government, this is just a nugget of information. Again, this was just the beginning. So the School of Government actually recommends that this sort of discussion happen on a regular and routine basis, just for the effectiveness and the efficiency of various boards. A lot of times, if it's not statutorily authorized, like Planning Board and Board of Adjustment, their boards are often created for a specific purpose at a specific time. And once that is met, or that need is met, then it's a good idea to revisit, okay, what is the scope, what is the responsibility? And that's kind of where we are here with a lot of our advisory boards. Things were set up for specific purposes, and now that some of that work has been accomplished, it's important to revisit that. So when we started this discussion, we looked at surveying neighboring municipalities and counties across not only Wake County, but across North Carolina. We asked them, okay, how is your advisory board structured? Do you have topic areas, focus areas? You'd be surprised. Some municipalities have 30 and 40 and 50 boards. We don't obviously want to get to that point, but if it's necessary, then it's important work. Again, we also surveyed staff and department directors, as well as the chairs and vice chairs for the respective boards. Some of the themes that come out of that discussion were the roles and responsibilities were not as clear as they once were. How do you measure success? You know, if you're constantly giving feedback and then you don't really see where that goes. And then inconsistent practices amongst our quarterly boards versus our statutorily authorized boards versus our monthly boards, et cetera. So wanted to kind of streamline all of that so everybody's at least on the same playing field. Okay. So for the Transit Advisory Committee, as mentioned in the email that, like I said, went out, I think it was on the 18th or 19th, the main focus for the Transit Advisory Committee are the 3 recommendations in red on this slide. So this is to incorporate our bike and pedestrian modes of transportation, and then change it from a Transit Advisory Committee to an advisory board that captures all of those modes of transportation. With that, again, as I mentioned before, that's going to change some of the focus of the board. You may see different modes of transportation, or would see different modes of transportation. So that's where in that survey you'll see an opportunity to say, okay, these are the things that we've historically reviewed, and I think they are important for us to continue to review. And here are some things that we probably will be captured under this new umbrella. And then again, we're going to have staff weigh in on that as well, on what they see as being important purposes for this board. And then it also eliminated the 3 ex officio members. So currently the board has been comprised of 6 residents and then 3 staff. So a planning staff, Parks and Rec staff, and then an economic development staff person to equal up to the 9. The 3 ex officio members were non-voting, and it oftentimes would create quorum issues when we had 1 or 2 members that were out, and then a member suddenly couldn't make it to a meeting, then we didn't have a quorum and we had to cancel a meeting. So it's also the only board that had staff serving in the advisory board scope in terms of membership. So this makes it more consistent across other advisory boards, making sure that all of them are residents that are serving, and also adds a youth representative. That was one of the focuses that come out of the work session, was to make sure that we're engaging our youth. We have a high population of young people that are wanting to be engaged in our community. This past year, we have the Apex Youth Council as part of our Parks and Rec. We actually received the highest number of applications, over 300 applications from that. So that's almost doubled from what it was in years past. So we want them to have a way that they can engage. And so this at least adds a youth representative in this way. Okay. So of those recommendations, we have again, the name change, Multimodal Transportation Advisory Board, again, wanting to capture that bike and pedestrian focus. This does have changes to the membership terms. So currently, members were appointed for 3-year terms. This does change terms to 2-year terms. It does not affect the term that you're currently in, but once the term that you're currently in expires, then if you are eligible for reappointment and you are reappointed, your term would go to a 2-year term versus a 3-year term. Again, adds the 3 voting positions, excludes the staff from voting, and we talked about the expanded roles. Any questions on that piece of it before we talk about the administrative side? Yes.
And maybe you'll cover this, this is Gay Williams for the recording, maybe you'll cover this in the administrative part, but I was just wondering the timing of adding the 3 members.
Sure, that's a great question. So a lot of these changes will require UDO amendments as well as town code amendments. And so the last slide of this presentation kind of walks through that timeline of when you can expect to see those. Because UDO amendments have a process that they have to go through, planning board public hearing, a town council public hearing, a lot of that is set up in a schedule, and so you won't see a lot of those changes until that March, April timeframe. And because there's 3 voting positions, we'll have to go through the recruitment process, we'll have to advertise, we'll have to allow time for members of the community to apply for those positions, et cetera.
Okay. Thank you.
Alan,
Yes.
I would suggest either you or Shannon or somebody maybe it's probably good to give an overview of the Bike Apex plan and the sidewalk priority plan that we've done in the past. That way, these folks kind of get a feel for kind of things that would be brought to this board in the future that are related to those kind of things, so that they kind of get the past of what we've done. Because I think it's been some nice work, but I think having these responsibilities, if we'd had this group then, it'd be nice to maybe been even better and smoother than we had it with those.
Wasn't there also a safe path or safe route to school?
Yeah, that's more of a funding thing than a plan, right? Or maybe not.
I thought they did some like route planning and.
Yeah, so I'm just briefly, we do have Bike Apex, which is our comprehensive bicycle plan. We adopted that in 2019, I believe. And it identifies priorities for improving our bicycle routes. So greenways are included in that, as well as, on-road and adjacent to road paths. There's other recommendations in that as well, such as wayfinding, the idea of having a citizen advisory board to inform bicycle planning was in there, safety and educational campaigns, but I'd say the main purpose of that plan is how do we improve bicycle infrastructure in Apex over time. So we do have that comprehensive bicycle plan. We don't have a standalone comprehensive pedestrian plan. It was integrated in our overall townwide transportation plan. And that in that plan, it prioritizes construction of standalone pedestrian projects that serve safe routes to school, safe routes to transit, and other activity centers like parks. We've had particular focus on our Safe Routes to School program. It was a need that was very evident. We had several pedestrian crashes adjacent to schools. And so we have one of our senior planners is really focused on identifying all the Safe Routes to School needs across town for all schools, so elementary, middle, high school, public and private. She talks with every school, school resource officers. Parks is involved in that because we have greenway connections. And that informs infrastructure improvements. The citizens passed a bond to help fund Safe Routes to School projects. As well as safety and educational campaigns, encouragement for more walking to school. So that's a highlight of some of the work that we're doing in those areas.
And there's a spreadsheet that we have, or a table that ranks the sidewalk projects too.
Yeah.
Based on categories that I think this group might want to revisit that and look at the scoring, because whatever rises to the top is the things we're going to try to do, and the scoring matters of what rises to the top. And I think you guys can inform what those policies should be in that way.
Yeah, so we do have a tool that we use to help inform staff requests to the CIP, which are then considered by town council as part of their budget capital improvement plan, the CIP. Considered by town council as part of their budget development process. That basically lays out what we're going to be working on infrastructure-wise for 5 years. And that includes all Safe Routes to School projects, as well as pedestrian infrastructure on thoroughfares and the next kind of level of roadway down, which is a major collector street in our entire planning area.
And I'll add, we have the same prioritization tool for CIP for greenways. So we follow like the same path, and that we use that to guide us on which greenways we should prioritize for design funding for construction.
Are they on the same table? Like, do they get competed with each other?
We have our own.
You have your own, okay.
Yeah, that's part of our master plan. We have a prioritization tool to score our greenways.
Okay.
And did you mention Safe Routes for Transit as part of that?
Yeah, so in the last year or so, we've our transit services have expanded, and that was one of the policy objectives, was prioritizing providing safe routes to transit. So Jenna, our senior planner who kind of oversees this effort, has added in a methodology to identify those specific transit needs. We also have other funding sources that we can apply for those transit needs. So that's helped us to go after that funding. And I was actually just talking with her today. It's been a little bit more of an as needs arise and kind of looking at needs in around bus stops. She's going to be working on how do we kind of identify these in a more formal approach like we have been with Safe Routes to School and on a regular basis. So that's something that the committee could be involved in.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be worth, once the new members are seated and appointed, it may be worth having kind of that work session and that orientation again, especially geared towards the new portions of the various plans that have been mentioned, just so that there's an educational component before we proceed.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so these are the administrative policy recommendations and changes. A lot of these items have not been clarified in any specific policy across any board. So the administrative policy changes would apply to every advisory board. So this is not specific to multimodal transportation. But we'll cover them kind of high-level overview. With attendance, if you're missing more than 3 consecutive meetings within a 12-month period, or more than 25% of the meetings, then of course you would be removed. Quarterly reporting will go to elected officials. And then also, we've talked about this since the work session, that we'll probably also send out a warning if you've missed or you're on the verge of missing too many meetings. Then we want you to at least know that going into the next meeting or going into the next quarter, etc. Stipends, all resident advisory boards would be eligible. At one point, certain boards were eligible to receive stipends and certain boards were not. This applies that all boards would be eligible for that, again, for meetings held and attended. Payments would be issued quarterly. Term lengths going from 3-year terms to 2-year terms with a maximum of 6 consecutive years. Diversity, again, because our council members are all elected at large and we don't really have districts and we're not split up that way. It's hard to really say, okay, well, we've got certain people from a district, but we at least have certain pockets and areas within the community. Planning has identified, as if you have not seen and have not done our budget survey, there are 12 different sections within our community that are divided up based on population and based on community demographics. So making sure that we're collecting applications and receiving feedback from folks from all of Apex and not just certain pockets, not just downtown, not just in the Sweetwater area, et cetera. And then our other diversity efforts, so ethnic, gender, et cetera. So making sure that we're being mindful that the representation that's appointed to the boards is representative of the community. And then eligibility, all members would be at least 18 years of age, with the exception of the youth representative, which we've talked about being new, and this would be a high school individual, and the youth representative terms would be for 1 year to allow folks that additional opportunity, and it's going to be hard for a high school member to serve for 6 years when they only have 4 years in high school. So, and then if there are resignations, it's been unclear as to who those get submitted to. In the past, people have submitted it to their board chair. Some have submitted it to the staff liaison, and we're not always informed and in tune with that. So this clarifies that resignations will come to the town clerk. Meeting minutes, in the past, staff liaisons have been responsible for that. That has transitioned slowly over this last year in 2024 to the town clerk's office. So this makes it clear that the town clerk or their designee will be responsible for the meeting minutes. and then having some required training, just so that folks understand what sort of conflicts of interest may look like in this role, and when you should recuse yourself. Also, new is an annual report requirement. So one of the things that this council has really been striving for is to have more efforts come out of these committee meetings and come out of the advisory board meetings, ideas, projects, programs, those kinds of things, and not just kind of the standard stamp of what's coming from staff. For example, in our environmental advisory board, having them focus on other environmental efforts, not just those that are coming from staff. And so this will provide an opportunity annually for the board to report back out to the mayor and council on what things that they are doing, how they align with the strategic goal, and what are some of their proposed objectives as they head into the next year. If they have ideas, there's not really a place once you come in to serve in this board. If you have ideas and suggestions and special things that you would like to be considered, there's no real way for you to get those out there. And so this allows for that. Additionally, besides the annual report requirement, this does clarify that membership on our resident advisory board should be corporate limit residents unless otherwise specified. We've got some statutorily authorized boards that require like an ETJ member or a county representative. This also clarifies that we'll have youth voting representatives and no staff serving on the boards. Any questions about the administrative?
A nit question, but
Sure.
you listed it on there, or I wouldn't have asked. This is gay.
On this slide or the next?
This one.
Okay.
So the minutes format: summary of action items or thorough meeting minutes, similar to town council.
Mm-hmm.
When do you do one and when the other? Because I've noticed our minutes are actually seems like almost a transcription. So, which will we fall under, our board, and how do you decide?
So the desire from council is that advisory board minutes should be a summary and not a transcription. So capturing the votes, the highlights, the main points, etc. And so for most advisory boards, they will be summary of action items with highlights. There are some boards like our Board of Adjustment and our Planning Board where they will be verbatim or semi-verbatim.
That's awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Just one more thing.
Yes.
Well, mostly just to point out, because folks might not know, but
Katie, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
just most folks might not know that currently the way this committee is set up, there is not a resident requirement for it. So just pointing that out.
Mm-hmm. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I
Yes.
did. Linda Barrett. And I'm assuming the cadence might change because we're quarterly now, so it may go to, because I was just looking at, you know, the attendance and that type of thing. And it could change based on the agenda to like every other month or monthly.
It could. We haven't really talked about that, so I don't know that it would change from quarterly, at least in the foreseeable future. But if the workload increases to where there needs to be a monthly meeting, then we can certainly have that conversation. But that's not been the case at this point. But the same rules would apply. So if you miss, 3 quarterly meetings, then you're already missing 25% of the meetings anyways, in terms of attendance.
Wouldn't it be one, if you miss one meeting a year?
Currently, yeah.
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 You missed
Okay.
one.
Yep.
You don't have many meetings.
We'll make sure we work together on the schedule.
Yeah, we might want to clarify that for the quarterly meeting groups, because I can see unplanned things happening and that missing a meeting.
Right.
And so maybe we would only use the 3 consecutive meetings instead, because we only meet quarterly, or something like that.
No, that's good. That's good feedback, because I believe this is, go back. Yeah, now this is the only board that's meeting quarterly. Everybody else is monthly.
Honestly, looking at the increase in scope and the two additional facets of transportation in this town that we now need to consider, I don't know that a quarterly meeting will be sufficient.
Agreed.
It's painful for me to say that we need to meet more frequently, but I think given the new scope assigned to the committee, we really don't have a choice. So
That's
take
great
that as
feedback.
a note
Yes.
that as another point of feedback.
That is good to know. Okay.
I was just more curious than anything on the stipend. Was that
Sure.
just to reimburse people and make them whole for their time, or was that more we're having trouble recruiting people? Let's make it a little more interesting to.
I think a little bit of both. When the initial, based on, because I was not here when it was originally set up, but based on the records and the meeting minutes from that discussion, is at the time there was, I think, a desire to have more folks with families and younger folks that could participate in meetings. Well, that created an issue with childcare. And so this was supposed to help with that. It was supposed to also help with travel. If this meeting space was farther than what you would normally travel, then it was supposed to kind of work to support those efforts or those expenses as well.
Thanks.
You have anything additional you want to add?
Childcare was
Yep.
the initial thought, and then this was an easier way to doing that.
Anything else? Okay. Alrighty. So this is kind of the next steps that we were talking about, Ms. Gay. Initiate the UDO amendments and changes to the town code. I have met with our planning staff, Parks and Rec, as well as legal on the next steps as it relates to these changes. We are targeting a March 1 date. That does not mean that they will be effective March 1, but we're hoping that at least they will have gone to planning board by March 1 and then on their way to town council. It is likely that they will be effective in April, that April 1st deadline, because again, we have to have time not only to do the UDO changes, go through the various boards to get them approved, and then recruit for and get people selected. Because if your membership goes up to 9 and then you don't have a quorum, then that could be an issue. We have started meeting with staff liaisons and department directors and applicable vice chairs and chairs in January. This board was a little unique because this is the first full week back after that decision, and so we were not able to meet with the chair and vice chair in this board, but that is our goal. And then the administrative policy, so the attendance and the things that we just talked about, those will likely go before council in February and then take effect the same date as the others, just so they're all kind of a same line in the sand. And then again, recruiting for those positions, and then we'll begin the quarterly attendance reports. April is at the end of this first quarter in 2025, and then the annual reports would be at the end of this year.
So one last question, I hate to go back, but on the administrative stuff, there's a cap of a maximum of 6 consecutive years. So Nick and I, as we currently sit, are over that limit.
Right.
So what is the effective date of that? Is it retroactive or is it going forward? What's the?
So do you know when your term ends, your current term? You know? Okay. So that's when it would start. So if you are at the end, let's say your term ends at the end of December 2025, then at the end of December 2025, if you've completed six-year terms, then you would roll off. If you have not, then and you're eligible for another 2-year term, then you would go to a 2-year term versus a 3-year term.
Okay, so this is it for Nick and I.
Yeah, and ironically, I'm late.
What?
But besides that, I did listen to the meeting that staff had. I thought it was 9 years.
For Board of Adjustment.
Thank you.
Yeah. Board of Adjustment, because that's a statutory requirement that they be 3-year terms. And in order to just keep them from changing as much. And they do quasi-judicial hearings, and it's a lot more procedural. They operate more of like a court case, so they just kept them the same.
But you don't know, Andy, you don't know when
I
your
think
terms are.
it's like June or July or something like that.
Well, it runs on the fiscal year, because that's when the new folks came in.
Some boards are fiscal and some are calendar.
Yeah,
We can get you that.
Yeah.
that's a huge loss if we're
Yeah.
gonna lose both of y'all in
I don't know
July.
how that works.
I mean, we'd be looking at a complete committee turnover
In the space of 12 months.
in the space,
Almost
less than
except
12
for
months,
Linda.
basically.
I think that's true for most of the committees that the town has, and across the board.
Yeah.
So it's not just
And I
this
mean,
one.
and we can take it back and and ask the mayor and council if there's interest in starting the term limits with the new terms, but it could give people more term date than what they would have had, if that makes sense. So if you're at the end of your 2-year term, if you're at the end of your second term, which I believe both of you are, so you've served 6 years.
7.
Right. And so if you started again, then you could essentially go another 6 years, which is beyond the term lengths now, which I think is 9.
Yeah.
So, but
I understand needing to make a clean break. I think the committee's in a unique situation in that we just had a very large number
Turnover.
of seats turnover.
Now we have
Was that-
50% change.
Was that a discussion, Brett, about term limits and people being on there?
Mhm.
So what was the approach? Just if the term limits are up within a year, let them go, or was there any discussion of?
Not really current members. It was more high level. Like I think there's a desire to have a little more churn on the boards. Maybe not this one as much, but other ones in particular. And we wanted to, some folks have been on there for a long time in some of these boards, and we thought that was having some fresh faces would have been nice. And so it was more about that, less about the current people who are near the end of their time.
Policies as far as term limits coming up. That was never a discussion.
No, I think grandfathering people in a little bit.
Coming back from staff, you think the discussion would be okay to come back from staff and say, hey, look, we're looking to expand maybe a couple of these seats.
Yeah. Maybe a grandfathering clause of some sort might be helpful to have in this case, in more than just this committee, but just in general. Yeah, we didn't really think about individuals in this context.
Linda, what's your on your second term?
I am on my second term. But
I think she just got reappointed.
Got reappointed.
In July.
Mhm.
So you're on 3 years now.
Hmm.
Okay.
And I did just look up the terms. So Nick and Andy are up in July of this
Yeah.
year.
And
also
so am I. Yeah, because I was filling.
Partial.
Yeah, I was on a partial.
Yeah, I was on before it was an official committee, so I'm adding years that are in there. So
Yeah, I think we were on that first year that it was unofficial.
But this is good feedback. So, and given that the board scope and has changed and the significant transition that this board has experienced just in membership, so.
Maybe the way to avoid it, sorry, is to just say it goes into effect at the end of the year or something. That way it doesn't catch you guys necessarily. That's another way of avoiding
Well, the
this.
idea of the staggered terms is so you don't have too much
Right.
turnover at one time, which we already did because of my partial term. And if you guys left,
Well, the way it's
and we
set up-
brought, and then we're going to bring in 5 new
Yeah.
people essentially, right? 2 to replace them
you
plus
open
3
up
new.
applications again, or do you just follow back with the ones that were already on hand?
Depends on when.
Yeah.
Depends on when the, so for this, because we've got 3 seats and these changes affect all boards, then we're going to do a recruitment for all positions.
I think we want to have this one be opened again because we probably want some sidewalk and pedestrian experts,
Right.
not just transit, to help with the additional responsibilities.
Makes sense.
Yeah, and most boards, if 3 members, like if this is a 9-member board, 3 people are on kind of a rolling 3-year term. So there's a potential that 3 people roll off at any given time.
Sure.
So for what that's worth, just keep that in mind. that however this plays out going forward, there is the potential that 3 of you will come up at the same time and you will roll off.
Right, but we would have 9, 9
You have
people
6, right?
total, right? So, whereas if it played out the way it says on paper, we'd have 5 new people in July,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Potential.
Of 9.
Right, potential. Mm-hmm. And again, as I mentioned earlier, this is the only board that you have the smallest number currently. You're the only board that was set up with just 6. So that's the unfortunate piece.
It sounds like we need to request an exception or something.
Yes.
We're special.
That's right. That's right. Okay, any questions?
Alan, I have one more comment. Sorry to take
Sure.
over a little bit. I think that this annual thing in front of the council will be of value, not just to have us be hearing it, but have the whole community be hearing what happens here. Because
Sure.
most people are probably not watching these things or reading the minutes, but it's really good work you guys do, and I think getting recognized in that way will be great.
Great.
Alan, I have a question. How does their input on the terms need to be provided? Is it sufficient that they've just discussed it and you've got that as notes, or?
Yes, and it'll be in the minutes from this discussion. Okay, anything else? Bless you. Okay. Thank y'all for having me.
Thank you, Alan.
Thank you. That was great. Very helpful.
All right, next up, Katie.
M tab now.
Hello again. So for the next item, we wanted to give another update on our transit prioritization study that we're conducting in the planning department. I think at the October meeting, I gave more of an overview of the project itself, so I didn't prepare many slides for the overall project. So hopefully you all are remembering what we're working on. This is basically the project to kind of identify the next step for transit in Apex. And I wanted to just share a few updates on that. So one of the first tasks in our list of tasks for the project was to conduct a plan summary, basically the literature review of the existing plans in Apex and our region that provide guidance about transit. And Alicia, who's hiding in the back, she's not hiding, she's in the back, completed this for us. We provided a draft document to you all for your reference and review, and a lot of you have been around while these documents were created. So just wanted to provide that to you all to let you know this is what we're looking at as far as making sure that we're aware of all these different efforts that have already come through in the past few years. Not to put you on the spot, Alicia, but is there, I know you added items under each plan that were like items of note and things like that. Is there anything you think is worth pointing out as they look through the draft?
So from when we started, we added the Western Big Branch area plan. That was the most recent plan that's been approved. So that summary, it's very brief. It's at the end for you all to look over. And I would say that I don't have it in front of me, so give me a moment to pull it up. But there's not really a lot that I found that would have like a significant impact on any choice that like this advisory committee like puts forward. It's still a question of, are we going to have more frequent service, or are we going to have like an additional route? So
Sounds good. So yeah, so that's, we haven't published it, it's not finalized, but if you all are interested or have time, we welcome any feedback from that. And then we've also been working through the analysis portion of the project. we've gotten our planning department GIS team on board, which has been really great, and they've dedicated some time to analyzing some of the results from our surveys that were conducted this past year, the public surveys, and I'm previewing some of these maps for you all just to get some reactions. So we've got maps showing two different things. I'm going to start with one and then go to the next set. Jenny in our department has created a map basically showing the locations of destination types that were asked about in our online survey. And those destination types were then, we asked folks to rank how important those would be to access by transit. And then, so in this map, they're just color coded so you can see what those categories were. So downtown, I said retail, supercenters, parks and community centers, hospitals, medical centers, schools. And then we also had asked about, I think, townhomes and multifamily developments. But we have chosen to add that to a different map with population density shown rather than here because it was getting complicated. But she's mapped those out and then shown a quarter-mile boundary around our current bus stops in town to compare how many of those destination types are actually already served. So you can see that there. And then she also did a different color-coded version where they are colored by the rank that people gave them in the actual survey. So basically you can see we also weighted it by a couple other factors too. I can't remember what they were. But so basically the bluer the color, the more important it was to serve with transit, and the yellower the color, the less important it was as far as the responses to serve by transit. So I know it takes a while to soak in that data, but I can probably send out the PowerPoint file if you want to look at it in your own time as well. But just one initial observation I've had that is, one, it's good to see it on paper mapped out, but two, in Apex, a lot of our destinations are already on the Go Apex bus line.
Katie, I have one question. This is Kay. The little blurb in the upper right-hand corner that's actually not on Route 1, what is that?
Oh, yeah. So I'll see if my cursor will work.
Yeah.
So this is actually on Go Triangle Route 305. It's not on Go Apex Route 1, but it is covered by existing transit service, which is now all day but weekday service. So that is important to note, and it's not, we didn't really get to that level of nuance in this map, but that is important to note. And then Jenny also went ahead and created this map, but added stops that we are fairly confident will be programmed or in operation by FY27 based on our partners' plans. And so I just tried to point them out. It's not the prettiest, but in the Wake bus plan, it's programmed for the Go Cary ACX route to convert to an all-day route and add a few more stops in town. And also the Go Triangle Route 311 is supposed to come back. So we've went ahead and just added a version showing those locations. But it's the same this destination data as the previous map, more bus stops shown. And then we have another set of maps In addition to the destination types question in the online survey, there was a different format where people could actually drop a pin on a map or digitally to designate places where they would like to see a bus stop. And so these aren't, the hexagons are actually not the pins themselves, but they're kind of consolidating multiple pins. There were lots and lots of pins that were dropped. So right now, the lighter blue hexagons may only have one pin drop in them, up to 4, and then the darkest blue ones have up to 50 pins dropped. And I think that one is the downtown one.
It's the what?
The downtown
Oh,
one.
okay.
And we also just have a version that shows the programmed projects through FY27 as well. So this map is a little bit different because it was just wherever somebody wanted bus service, so it's not just those key destinations. So you see a lot more pins like out in Western Apex, for example, where there's not necessarily one of those destination types, but people did say they wanted access.
This is Nick. Can you tell on the extra ones that are that are further out there, are they residential or are there actual destinations out there that they're clicking on?
Yeah, so if we kind of, it's not one-to-one, but if we kind of click through, there are a lot of pins that do correspond with some of those uses, like Pleasant Park, Nature Park, Sweetwater.
That's what I was looking for.
Yeah, but there are some that are just houses. So
some guy's house.
right, and that is a question because we have this map showing that a lot of our key destinations are on the route, but not all of our population can access them because they don't live on the route. So yeah.
Am I interpreting this right? I'm guessing we've got one cluster of 3.
Pleasant Park.
Is that Pleasant Park or is
Yeah.
that Walmart?
I'm trying to find Walmart.
I think this is Walmart.
Walmart's down here.
Oh, I'm
Uh,
at 540. I was thinking I was at 55. That's Pleasant Park.
This is Walmart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it goes Publix to Walmart.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I was confused because, okay, we already have a stop. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, so if I can use my cursor here, so here's Pleasant Park, here's the Apex Friendship Schools campus area. This is the Nature Park area. This is Sweetwater. And I think everything else is single family homes. West of 540. We also have, I'm gonna stretch here. This is like the new Depot 499 development right here. And then this is the library right here. There's Walmart. So, yeah.
And that Depot 499 has 2 schools within like that general area.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me, so
It's
yeah.
not finished yet either.
One of them. Neighborhoods.
Yeah. Departments.
So that school's, I think it's scheduled to open this fall, maybe.
In theory, right?
So so there will be an elementary school here, and there's an operating school, Scotts Ridge here.
So,
And there's St. Mary Magdalene too.
Yeah, St. Mary Magdalene right there. So yeah. So we're still kind of working through the analysis. We are going to be adding the jobs and population overlay, as well as some other socioeconomic characteristics with this data, as well as future planning scenarios to essentially see how we can foster connections to as many of these destinations as possible with the least amount of routing and funding, to see kind of what would make the most sense if we were to expand routing, and use that to help develop recommendations.
When do you expect to have that kind of rough idea of what those routes might look like?
Yeah, so we're already starting to work on them with our GIS team on board. We're making better progress than we were before. And so for the April meeting, we should have that
Great.
information ready.
This is Wendy. Has there been any recent conversation about taking the route that exists and dividing it in half? So we have, well, not dividing it in half, but having transportation come from both directions to like cut the wait time in half?
We haven't specifically considered that option yet, but we can add it to our list of options. Are you thinking like a reverse
Yes.
or circulator? So the way our route is oriented now, kind of half our route is really in loops and half of our route goes in both directions. So we'd have to look at it, how that could make sense. I mean, in a moment I can talk about just the increased frequency of the route, which might kind of solve that, most of what I think you might be looking for.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the biggest question about convenience on the route as it is if you are coming from the west, you kind of have to go down to Walmart before you get to downtown, which is based on the map, you know, where people want to go the most is downtown. So that could potentially address that. So yeah. But that's about all I have for now on that one. If you want, we can go to the next
Please do.
item. So we just wanted to make you all aware that the Wake Transit Plan update, which is the county-wide 10-year vision plan for how to spend the money that's being collected through this half-cent sales tax and other revenue program, to guide what we do with the funding. There's an engagement period that's actually open right now. There's a project page that you can either find through this URL that's on your slide, or I can send you out a link, but we're also working on an e-blast that will go to the transit listserv, or transit mailing list, hopefully this week or early next week. If you recall, there's 4 main goals of this plan. The 10-year plan is really seeking to update what projects are actually assigned to help meet those 4 goals. In between round 1 of engagement, which was this past summer, and now, the language has shifted a little bit in what the project team is asking folks for feedback on. And so I've included some posters here that they're currently looking for feedback on. I think one of the biggest, I guess, items that the plan is wrangling with right now is the fact that the commuter rail project is just too expensive to implement in the next 10 years. And now we need to figure out what to do instead. This poster is trying to get at the question, and they've kind of proposed it as, we know you want rail service in Wake County. Here's what we could do instead of commuter rail is support other rail efforts, such as the S-Line rail corridor, which we're on in Apex, sort of supporting the routes that the Amtrak service uses to make it more efficient, and sort of making sure we're ready for future rail opportunities, potentially along the commuter rail corridor or otherwise into the future. And other than that, it hasn't been that specific in terms of planning. So it's just asking for feedback. The survey basically asks that question, so we would appreciate if anyone can think about it and fill it out.
it's not very specific. So we're not totally sure how useful this feedback will be for this next round of work, but it'll be interesting to see what people say. One of the proposals that the project team is kind of bouncing off people right now is, if we don't do the commuter rail corridor that was planned, what if we kind of make a BRT system to approximate it instead? A BRT is bus rapid transit. It's faster, it's more reliable, it's more frequent type of transit service that often uses its own lane or additional infrastructure to improve speed and reliability for service, but it's just a bus. It's not a train. And if we somehow use the I-40 corridor to add this type of service, what do you think about that instead of rail? So that's a big question that they're floating right now for folks and would like feedback on. It would still be expensive, but not nearly as expensive as commuter rail. And it offers other options, such as kind of making a transfer station near the airport, that rail couldn't do, and things like that. But again, it's not really fleshed out yet. And then another thing that they're floating past the public right now is this sort of age-old question of, where would you rather see bus service funding focused on? More frequent service in the more dense areas of our county, so focusing more on Cary and Raleigh, serving more people, like as in more riders on a daily basis? Or would you rather concentrate funding to build out networks where they don't currently exist or don't exist well, such as building mobility hubs in more communities and providing more town-to-town connections? So providing Apex, for example, with a mobility hub that would then offer the ability to connect to service, to connect to Holly Springs and other areas like that. So what we've been doing so far to help support them with that is, we've had 2 pop-up events, or we're scheduling 2 pop-up events. One's happened already, one hasn't happened yet. Alicia and I attended one at the Christmas tree lighting event that happened on December 6th. It was a little bit tough to get people really like jazzed up about transit when they were there for the tree lighting, because it was a really fun event, but like it was kind of hard to compete. So there was a kind of a put a coin in a box question about the people versus places poster that I just showed you. And 13 people put their coin in favor of serving more people, so the more urban areas and those kind of big regional projects, and 9 were more in favor of serving more places, which kind of surprised me since we were in Apex. I thought it might skew more towards the places than the people, but it didn't. And then I got some informal updates from Campo staff from some of the other events that have happened so far, and that ratio is pretty much in line with what they've been hearing across the county at different places.
Katie,
Mm-hmm.
It's Gay. The people, 22 people, I think that was pretty good for competing with tree lighting. Did they know that Apex was not included in the Serve More People?
Yeah, so I kind of had to grab people a little bit I mean, some people were interested, but other people, I kind of had to like explain the process to them a little bit. And even with that, they were choosing the Serve More People.
Okay, I was just wondering if they realized that. Okay.
Yeah.
Katie, if I may, Nick, of course I'm not taking it, and I will take the survey, but my feedback to you, if you wanted to relay directly, is I think I would fall more in line with the people as well. The reason is let's say, and this has happened multiple times, I want to go to I want to go hang out in downtown Cary. ACX doesn't run on the weekends when that's convenient for me, so I'm driving. So on the more people, they said they could offer more days. On the more places, I would imagine that the days served would be that Monday through Friday, just like the 305. I had my nephew come into town, and he wanted to park his car at my house and take the bus to State, but he can't do that on the weekend. He's stuck doing it on. So, therefore, I would fall on the people as well.
Yeah, that's good feedback. I think as staff, we've been a little bit concerned about the messaging to make sure it's clear about what people are choosing between. And we don't feel it's like totally clear right now. So I feel like the feedback is only really going to register at a high level, and we'll still have to kind of work through what exactly does that mean for Apex in terms of what funding would be available and what types of projects would be prioritized. We already know that Route 12 has been programmed, so there will be that connection to downtown Cary. What we don't know is if there will be, an ability to get to Holly Springs, for example, or things like that, which that's really the trade-off.
May never remember Route 12. Change my reference. It's not the ACX for much longer.
Yeah, I would wish it into existence if I could, but I think of it as the Route 12, but it'll probably not until this summer or fall that it converts over.
I think the way it needs to be described is something like, would you rather increase the frequency between Cary and Raleigh from 30 minutes to 15 minutes, or would you rather increase the frequency from Apex to Raleigh from hourly to 30 minutes, something like that, where they're thinking about that choice they have. And that's probably the same amount of money. It's one more bus. And I think most people would have said Apex to Raleigh, duh. I mean, I did the survey and I said duh places, but I don't think people are thinking about it as that kind of trade-off. Because I mean, some folks may say, oh, I'd love to get between Raleigh and Cary more frequently, but I just don't think that many people in Apex, that ratio would say that versus a new route or a more frequent thing from Apex to Cary or Apex to Raleigh, personally, if they knew that was really what the question was asking, which is how I interpreted that question.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that to me is kind of lost here in the way this question is asked is the scenarios that are kind of behind these two simplified options. Option 2 includes a lot of money for mobility hubs in a lot of different towns outside of Raleigh and Cary, which includes Apex and really gives an opportunity for them to connect to all types of transportation. And that's just not really highlighted here. And option 1, as Brett was saying, is really like internal to Cary and internal to Raleigh, increasing frequency. So I would just encourage you, because these are so simplified, I think the survey has a place for you to provide written feedback. Put your written feedback, like be specific about what your comments are so that the team can use that and not just option 1, option 2.
That's a good point.
Sounds like there are no more questions.
So I also wanted to let you know we are going to have another pop-up event in Apex, and it's planned for Saturday, January 18th to be at the Senior Center, but that's also the same day that there's the MLK breakfast reception at the Senior Center. So we've got we've got an event happening and we've got the Senior Center. So we're hoping to capture more people and get feedback there. And we'll be sending out the e-blast to get people to fill out the survey that way as well. So the survey will be open until at least through the end of January. We're sending out the e-blast, and then also there is a staff meeting with the project team at Campo at the end of January, where we'll be kind of talking through policy discussions and the CFA program update and things like that. And I don't have an agenda yet, so I don't know exactly what we'll be discussing, but if you all do have feedback, you know, as you're looking through this and are taking the survey that you want to make sure staff are aware of, we can help convey that during this 2-day meeting. Yeah.
Is it local?
It's in Cary.
Oh, okay.
It's not bad.
I go into Vegas for a big camp.
No, we don't have that kind of budget. But yeah, so do let me know if you think of anything.
Would it help if any of us attended the breakfast?
That's a good
Would it
question.
help people with the survey, or?
Yeah, so I think there should be at least one person from the actual project team. And if you are so inclined, we would love to have you there. What I think we found at the first pop-up was it does take a little bit of conversation to get folks to kind of start processing this information. And so, like, there were a couple of people I talked to at the pop-up for like 5 or 6 minutes about it. And then you lose other people going by during that time. So if you have an interest, that would be great. I think we're setting, Alicia actually might know, setting up at 9:30 or it's in the morning.
Yes, so we were asked to be set up and everything ready by 9 a.m. because they want to start bringing people in from the walk around 9:30. So they want to make sure that everything is set and settled so we're not, running around and in the way. So if you get there probably at 9:15, because I think that the planning staff we're gonna have set up handled, but if you want to do the walk and then join us afterwards, that'd also be great.
Thank you.
And that's all I had for that item.
Great. So that takes us to the community funding area.
Yes. So this is the item that we discussed at our October meeting, and I'm bringing back updates in January. This is the main funding pot that we have through the Wake Transit program to fund Go Apex. We get our 50% match in funding through this program. We can apply for both capital and operating projects. And I previewed our 2 possible applications that we were thinking of in October, and have done a little bit more work kind of refining the possible projects between then and now. So we had our one idea, which was a capital project for bus stop improvements. That was basically just going to be rolling forward the same project that we've applied for the past 2 years, which is $200,000 for bus stop improvements, which would be a 50% match of $100,000 and $100,000. We're pretty confident we're going to just go ahead and apply for that one again this year to keep the stream rolling for bus stop improvements. And we have found that that project has been successful. We've gotten the funding the past 2 years, so we're planning to continue that. The other one was, I think, one that required more discussion, which is an operating project for increased frequency on Go Apex Route 1. This was identified by staff as sort of the lowest hanging fruit if we wanted to try to get that funding for FY26. Otherwise, we would wait till FY27 to apply for funding. I did have a discussion with Go Cary about the logistics of it. Because of the constraints they have around their vehicle supply right now, the earliest they could feasibly increase frequency on Go Apex Route 1 would be in Q4 of FY26, which is essentially April of 2026, which is 1 quarter before FY27. They just can't commit to it. They're placing vehicle orders now, but the vehicles take 12 to 18 months to arrive, and they just don't have enough to dedicate to this service at this time. We also talked through two potential service options if we want to move forward, which are option 1 and option 2. Option 1 essentially doubles the amount of service provided. So instead of hourly service, 6 a.m. to 10 p.m., it would be 30-minute service from 6 a.m. through 10:30 p.m., which would add about 110 revenue hours per week, basically doubling, and it would result in approximately $170,000 in increased total costs for FY26, but that would all be in Q4 of FY26. So if we look forward to FY27, it would be essentially 4 times that amount of increased cost. Option 2 would be to follow Carey's current model that they offer on most of their routes, which is 30-minute service from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and then going to hourly service from 7 p.m. to 10 p.m. And then on Sunday, they only typically do hourly service. So this would add about 66 revenue hours per week and would be a proportionate amount of money less than option 1. So it would be about $106,000 in increased total costs in FY26. Again, all in Q4 only. So we talked to Campo as well about our CFA application. We have like a pre-application meeting we have to do with them. And informally, I think they liked the idea of option 2 better from obviously a cost standpoint. And so I think as staff, we're kind of leaning towards that option rather than option 1 at this time. But again, we still have until January 31st to submit our application. So if there's any questions or comments about that.
How long has GoCarry been operating on the option 2 model?
I don't know the answer to that. I would suspect it has been after the Wake Transit Plan funding became available. I'm pretty sure that before the Wake Transit funding was available, they were pretty much hourly service, and they've gotten funding to increase frequency and weekend service through that program on their existing routes.
All of their routes they did?
I think there's a couple routes that have slightly different schedules, but this is most of them.
Katie, do we know what I'm just thinking about the route options, what Carey's cost per boarding is? I mean, I'm just thinking about, our goal is to get those numbers down. Are they achieving that lower goal number or not?
From what I recall of seeing their data, I haven't seen that exact figure from them, but their ridership does tend to be higher than ours. They do serve some pretty large commercial areas and have bigger anchors than we do, so they do have higher ridership on their routes.
And they have more than one route?
Yeah, I think they have 8 now.
And they have a lower goal also.
Okay.
As community funding areas are kind of the goal that we need to hit is fewer riders than Carey and Raleigh.
I mean, certainly the consistency of every 30 minutes, it's the same every day, is attractive, but it is a significant cost difference.
That was my first thought, Gay, when looking at this. The reason I asked Katie how long they've been doing this is, they've got a lot of experience, years and years of experience with a lot of routes. So it makes sense to defer to or use that experience in a situation like this. My only concern is if this is something they just switched to 6 months ago or last year, that whole consideration's kind of out the window.
Well, and to your point, we don't have the experience to know when is our ridership going to be in higher demand.
Well, you have, I
Have
think,
some,
2.5 years of data now by boardings per hour,
Not Sunday though.
but not on Sunday, correct?
I look at it from a cost and aesthetically. I would much, the 30-minute service was a two bus option, right? I just don't see 2 buses necessary off peak hours. So I lean towards option 2, plus I like the hours better. They just make more sense to me.
Any other feedback for Katie?
I just noticed one little typo, and this is probably the only place this is going, so it won't matter.
Okay.
But in option 2, on Monday through Saturday, it says 7 p.m. to 10 p.m.
Yeah,
That's right.
Oh, it is right. Oh, I see.
It switches to.
It's not a typo. I misread it.
Yeah, I mean,
I see. Okay. 30-minute, and then it switches to hourly at 7 o'clock. Okay. I misread it. Thank you.
yeah, and I tried to pull, so we don't really have recent reliable ridership at the trip level, like at the hourly level, unfortunately. But I pulled our data from last year, and it does tend to drop off after 7. Probably maybe not as much as in other places, because we don't have that kind of 9 to 5 ridership that other places do. But it does drop off a bit, so I felt like it was reasonable for us to consider that option.
Is there any news on adding Sunday?
That's a good question. So we are still awaiting the revised service agreement from Go Wake Access in order to allow us to do the Go Apex door-to-door service on Sunday. That's really the limiting factor for us right now, because we have to offer Go Apex door-to-door with the Route 1 service. We're hoping that'll be soon, but we don't know. We heard at the end of December or middle of December that it was still in their attorney's office, and there just is a backlog. So we're hoping that'll be soon.
Don't we know this is important?
We're special.
I think we've conveyed it to as many people as we can at this point. And I did hear from Go Carry that, typically they do their service change in like early April, which is the date we're now aiming for, because it's just easier to do service changes with their service change schedule. It's when they assign all the operators to the routes and things like that. And theirs actually might be pushed back a little bit this year, so which actually might be a good thing for us. Like, so if it's in May, that might give us a little more time to get this sorted out to launch it then. But we are still working towards it.
Thank you.
So that's all I had for that item.
Yep. All right, so you're up with informational updates.
And you should have a handout on your table, which also went out in the email. And I'm not going to present, but if anyone has questions, I'm happy to answer.
So we're basically at this point 3 months trailing on current data from Go Carry.
So yeah, so we got November data in early January. It's typically about 3 weeks behind the month. So typically I would get November around the 3rd week of December. It came in early January. And so I should hopefully have December's data next week, I'm thinking. But yeah, we just have through November right now.
So the on-time percentage, September, October, November, has really dropped off. Any feedback from Go Carry as to why?
So I've asked them about it. They are working on a new tool that is supposed to provide better information about their on time, but it has taken longer than originally anticipated. We've talked through it though with them, and our guess at this point, though it can't be confirmed, is that the new routing setup has additional time points that weren't there before. So the way we serve the start and the end of the route is actually two different time points in the front of the Mason Street Municipal Building. And then we immediately have another time point at the Senior Center. And my suspicion is that the non on time is happening in that milieu. Yeah.
Rotunda or roundabout area.
Yeah, because it seems to have kind of been consistent since we changed the routing. And I don't have any other data to corroborate, but that's my suspicion.
Can we get data from them, like just to confirm, like from that specific time point? Then we're not guessing.
That brings me, Nick here, that brings me to just a recommendation, and I suspect that it's a day late and a dollar short, but it never really made sense for me to have a time stop and a break for drivers before the Senior Center and Town Hall. So my recommendation is maybe move to have the drop off at the Senior Center first and then circle back to the municipal building.
We could talk through that. I can't remember, because I remember we did talk through with Go Carry about what should we do? Should we serve it first or second?
Okay.
And we ended up with serving it after the layover, but off the top of my head, I can't remember why. But I can look back and try to figure out why that was, and maybe we do try shifting those.
So I just want to provide an additional update from what's in here on the Mobility Hub feasibility study. So because this won't kind of be broadcast to the public before your next meeting, but we do have our next public meeting scheduled, and it will be February 26th. It's another open house from 4 to 6 p.m. and that's at the Senior Center. That would be a great meeting for this group to attend and drop by and provide input. We'll be sharing information about the location that the hub is likely to be planned for, and some concepts for people to provide input on. We're meeting with potentially affected property owners tomorrow, so I'm not going to share where that is yet because we promised that we would share it with them first. But yeah, please come to that meeting. Again, that's February 26th from 4 to 6 in the Senior Center.
Is there any preparation you would suggest we make in advance of showing up at the open house?
So no, I think, just going to the open house, participating in the activities that they plan, providing any comments that you have. I wouldn't say that there's any pre-work that you need to do for that.
There is a project webpage.
There is.
If you want.
It's publicinput.com/Apex Hub. Yeah. And so any information about the open house will be posted there soon, probably next week.
And that's open to the public.
That is, yeah. I would say turnout was kind of low for the first meeting, so I'd love to have you guys there. This will be important for transit, as well as bicycle and pedestrian connectivity in the future.
that show up on our, what means we use to publicize it? Because some of us are active on things like Facebook pages and stuff where we could try to encourage people to attend.
So I expect we'll have our communications department put it out on the town's social media, Facebook. It'll be on the town's calendar, and we'll send it out through the email list for people who signed up for both transit and any long-range planning interests.
So,
Any other questions for Katie on anything in the handout? Bus stop improvements are on there. Just before we jump. Okay, guess we're good.
so I'll defer back to you.
Okay, other business. Gay, you mentioned you had one item you wanted to bring up for other.
Oh,
business.
yeah, I wanted to talk about, I mean, this is great, what we're talking about doing, but in reviewing the material Katie sent out, I was reminded, of course, about our, I might get the terminology wrong, but our costs per rider, so boarder, cost per boarding, and ways we might be able to get that down, short of the things we've already discussed, increasing our frequency and so forth. And I know we've talked in passing about marketing and that sort of thing in the past. We know more about our ridership now. And I just wanted to see if there's an interest in looking at marketing, basically, some targeted marketing to increase our ridership and hopefully get those numbers down. And Katie, I sent you a message and you sent me back some information. I wonder if it might be helpful just verbally to share. I was asking about do we have a goal, and what is our goal for the cost per boarder, for the, I've forgotten the term, riders per route or whatever it is. And you shared some really good information with me.
Yeah, so you had asked, do we have a target or a goal? And basically I responded that the CFA program that we get our funding from is really our kind of default target for our ridership and our cost per boarding. It's a stepped target over a 5-year period. We are now in year 3 of our service, and our boardings per hour, boardings per trip metric is, our target is 3, and we're meeting that. So we're at like 3.2 something for FY25 so far. Next year it goes up to 4.5, and then the year after that it goes up to 6, and that's kind of the permanent CFA target for
those are
boardings per hour.
Boardings per trip. Is there a specific cost per boarding target listed in the CFA?
Yeah, so there's a corresponding cost per boarding as well. It's $25.50 per boarding for year 3, and then it steps down from there. I can't remember what it is right now, but we're above that. So we're at like 32.
You said it was 25, 26-ish?
Yeah, 25.50 for this year. And we've had discussions with the
21-20, sorry, the year 4, I'm just looking at the email you sent me.
Oh, great, okay.
Is 21.25, and then year 5 and forward is $17. But you said that was not adjusted for inflation.
Right, so that was approved in 2018, and as we all know, inflation has happened quite a bit in the past few years, and especially in the transit industry, costs have just gone up primarily for operators' wages. There was a big jump in 22, basically, and Go Triangle, Go Raleigh, Go Cary, like all the operators in our region and nationally were facing operator shortages, and there was a lot of increase in operator pay to help compensate for that, and so across the board costs have gone up, and so we don't feel it's necessarily as reasonable of a goal as it was in 2018 to try to meet that number. Of course, we want our number to be lower, but we're in discussions with Campo about what that target should be, that dollar figure should be moving forward for this program.
So I know we're kind of out of time here, but the obvious concern is we're trending up, have been for some time, slowly kind of trickling up. You know, if we're looking at now 25 to 26 neighborhood for this year, 2025, and we're at the same time talking about doubling or nearly doubling frequency, we're not setting ourselves up for success even with an inflation adjusted target.
One comment though, I think we're talking about that increase not until the end of FY '26,
True.
right? So that's two more, I'm getting confused. It's more than a year away.
Correct.
Is that right? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Thank you.
And costs do keep going up every year, even though the number of riders, like the riders is a more discrete number. You know, the cost.
Boardings per trip.
Yeah, the cost keeps going up because we pay a fee to go carry, and every year their costs go up. So we essentially would have to keep raising ridership every year to keep the costs static.
I'm glad you mentioned that, Katie, and that's the one point of additional business that I wanted to touch on, and this kind of aligns with what Gay was mentioning, and that's that, you know, we've spent several years really hyper focused on creating the routes, getting the routes up and running, establishing the service, getting the funding from various sources, and we've spent little to no time planning how we're going to grow and improve the service over time, right? And so now we're starting to get pinched with a budget goal we probably can't meet given where we are and what our cost per boarding trends are. And so, you know, I think it would be smart for our next meeting, or preferably before that, we have a discussion about how we go about doing that. Part of it is marketing and increasing ridership. Part of it possibly is, you know, I have questions about, you know, I have no doubt who's responsible here at the town for securing the funding, for example, for the routes. But I have honestly no idea who's responsible for, you know, growing the service or growing the ridership or use of the service, or who's responsible for the performance of the service, whether that be on time or our number of boardings or whatever measurement you want to use. And so having those answers or clarity on those things, I think, is important, especially now that we're looking at this kind of pinch coming. I know we can't answer or solve any of those things right now, but I think it's something we need to discuss in depth at our next earliest opportunity. Anybody have any other?
Andy, the only other thing I would add, just based on the earlier presentation and our pending changes, is to consider whether we should meet more frequently, or at, you know, like on a bi-monthly basis, or you know, we scheduled a special meeting if, for example, we wanted to have this conversation, be open to scheduling special sessions.
Yeah, I think we're already, you know, we already struggle with a quarterly meeting frequency, and we haven't even touched on the two other areas of responsibilities that we're now going to have. So yeah, I think that official point of feedback needs to be emphasized with whomever ultimately makes that decision. I'm personally not inclined to want to call a special meeting for everything like this that comes up. But let's definitely try to get approval to move ahead with an increase in meeting frequency, just so we're all on the same page, or so that there's an understanding of the desire of the members of this committee. What do you each feel is an appropriate meeting frequency, given, you know, the fact that our area of responsibility is increasing from 1 to 3 here? I heard you say.
I think bi-monthly.
Like once every 2 months.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that seems reasonable to me. Just you know, just from a scheduling standpoint, that would work.
Linda.
I agree. I mean, we struggle to meet the timeline now with a robust agenda.
Mm-hmm.
So when we add on those other topics, I think we're definitely going to need to increase to that.
Yep. Nick.
I'm indifferent. Yes, increase, but whether it be bi-monthly or monthly, I find that responsibility. I'm fine to meet that. Yes.
I would say bi-monthly for now.
I would agree with bi-monthly.
And the reason I say bi-monthly instead of monthly is knowing the commitment of staff and all that goes into that. If we need it monthly, if we're still getting pushed once we've taken on these new things, then we can request a monthly. But I'd rather start with bi-monthly and see how that goes.
Just one special meeting regarding the bike and pedestrian, you know, some kind of informational meeting, kind of like what we had last time, would be a good thing, I think.
Yeah, and if we, like, like Alan mentioned earlier, if we can align that with the onboarding of the new committee members, that would be best. Then we can have one special meeting and not two.
Yeah, so I can, I'm taking notes and I can forward this to the town clerk's office, but just wanted you all to know that we're deferring to them on these types of questions for now, because they're dealing with all the different boards. And so basically I'm going to funnel this information to them. And so the response, if any, you know, whatever is needed would come from them.
I'm happy to send an email, and I would encourage the rest of the committee members, if they feel strongly about it, to send an email to Alan and just
the time frame, as I recall, was the summer, correct?
For the introduction of the
For
new,
it to be official.
Yeah, so they have recruiting starting in February and March for the new committee members, is what he had on his.
Yeah.
I thought it was April, maybe.
Yeah, so they may be trying to line it up with, well, I don't know, because not all boards are on a fiscal year. Ours is, but he said not all boards are, so it may not be trying to line that up. But anyway, do we need, and I know this is not your area, but Andy, do we need to vote on that as a group so that you could reach out to Alan and say it was unanimous? I mean, it sounds like it's
I mean, if
unanimous.
someone wants to make that motion, we can vote on it for sure.
So moved.
All right, do I have a second?
I second it.
All right, all those in favor of requesting a bi-monthly meeting frequency from the town clerk, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
So it's in the record at least.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, I'll send that email to Alan.
Thank you.
And again, I think based on what Alan was saying, it's still subject to the approval of the bylaws.
Oh, sure, yeah, and it's a
So,
request.
Yeah,
Right.
but we have it as a record.
Yeah. But while they're making all these other changes, that would be a good time to incorporate it.
Any other business? Anyone? All right, I think we're officially adjourned. Thank you, everybody.